Shalom Aleichem. We're going to talk about the very shchichtige shaila. Many people have to eat on TISHA B'Av for various reasons. It could be someone's a chayla, someone's a lady's muberes and menekes. We know this year actually muberes and menekes a little bit more kal. Moment halachas muberes and menekes to have to fast on TISHA B'Av. Medina in the Gemara, unless it's Teich Lamed from Shehar Leida, but otherwise they have to fast. This year it's a little bit more kal. There's a famous Shuvah Shus Yankiv that says that we find a murder gekula on a TISHA B'Av Shnitcha that you're allowed to eat. The Bala Bris could eat after Chatzos. So he says 1 second. The regular Tainus is no head to Bala Bris. And Uberes Menekes is mutter. They don't have to fast. So therefore, it must be Uberes Menekes is also mutter. That's what he says. This base May actually says Punkfaket. He says that Uberes Menekes, always a regular Tainus, doesn't have to fast, but here they have to fast. And let me see them we can make it. So for make by Bris Milah, so kosher can on regular Tainus, you can make it for Bris Milah, for the Bala Bris to eat. So he says he spaz Punkfaket for the Shvus Yankiv says. Meister Mishabur brings the Shvus Yankiv, Rabbi Kvega, that a Beres Menekes, if they're not feeling well, they could eat on a TISHA B'Av that's nitcha like this year. It's a question of how to learn to be halacha. Doesn't mean dafka after chatzos, for chatzos. So we're not going to get into it because that's not really our noiser today. But the main point is that there are many, many ladies this year, more than other years, that are going to be eating on TISHA B'Av. Or you could have stam chayla, the people that will be eating. So the question is exactly how to make it Havdalah. So that's what I want to discuss today. Let's first talk about what does everyone else do. So obviously, to make Havdalah on TISHA B'Av, you can't. The way you make Havdalah is that you drink a cup of wine, a cup of grape juice, or even something else. Chamamadin we'll see soon, but obviously on TISHA B'Av you can't do that. You can't drink. Making Havdalah without a kais doesn't work. Without the kais, you're not Yotze Havdalah. So that's why we wait till Motzei TISHA B'Av to make the Havdalah. The some Rishonim even hold that maybe you're not even Yotze. If you technically would make on TISHA B'Av, so maybe don't pass like that, but upon him, that's how weit it goes. The Mechaber does bring down a Tov Kuf Nun Vav Sif Aleph. That means you make Boyer Mereish, that you still do. Boyer Mereish has to do with Motzei Shabbos. We state in Gemara Pesachim. Shabur says they should make a brach on the Or Kodim Shekayin Eicha. That's the meaning in the shuls. People make Boyer Mereish. If you forgot, Shabur says you can make even later on. What about ladies? The shaila that all the ladies ask, what do they do Boyer Mereish? Ladies know there's a shaila about ladies making Boyer Mereish. Remember, there's a bialocha in Ilchos Havdalah, it's the Mereish Tzadivav, that's the mistapik of ladies. Al-Mechuyev in Boyer Mereish. There's a Kavachayim, Birkei Yosef, it's just Lahedi and Mechuyev. Mereish also is medaktik when a steamer and Mechaber that's mashed from ladies Al-Mechuyev. Emes others learn the bialocha is only mistapik if they're Mechuyev, but he's not arguing that if they want, they can make, like any mitzvah sasesha is mangroma that they're allowed to make. Upon him, we always have the men make, and same thing this year. The right thing would be that the husband should make a boyer reish in the house before he goes to shul by the Shabbos. If there's a man, obviously, he makes a boyer reish to be mitzvah the bnei bayis, but for whatever reason he forgot and he heard it in shul, then the lady should make the own boyer reish. Children on TISHA B'Av that are eating, they don't make Havdalah. So the Chaynim Takamutra, why not? But that's clear. There's no issa for Ketanim really to eat before Havdalah. There's a Magen Avram in Reish Samach Tes that speaks about it because you can't put them in a mat of them that they're not going to be able to eat. But L'maisa B'derech Klal, they do hear Havdalah. But here, the meaning is not to make Havdalah for kids. It's different svaras. Why not? One svaras is they're going to be older. They're not going to be eating on TISHA B'Av, so therefore there's no chinuch. Whatever it is, that's the fact. The minhag olam is that Ketanim don't make. Oh. But when you have someone that's not a katan, you have a gadol, then avada l'chari, you have to make Havdalah before. Now, very interesting. There's a Truva Kaifis Truvis that Reb Chaim Zechayim Levracha writes to Yashiv that he was moira that people that have to eat on TISHA B'Av, they should not make Havdalah. I said there's no chiv Havdalah on TISHA B'Av. That's what he named done. And not only that, you're drinking more than you have to drink. You have to eat on a tainus. Okay, you have to eat. But more than that, mechadesi you should do. So Mela, he paskined that you should not make Havdalah, and the Chayla should eat without making Havdalah. That's what he paskined, but he says that he heard the Shver paskin different. And he wants to know if it's true. This is printed in Koivish Truvus, Chelik Aleph. Be'ashav answered him back, yes, it's true, that I did pass in that way, and he brings the Achronim, which I mentioned before, the Big Yosef and others say clearly that a Chayla has to eat. On Tisha B'Av, he has to make Havdalah first. That about it, there is a Chayvus Havdalah. And he said in that you're saying that you shouldn't eat more than you have to. So here you're drinking something that's really not really to Ellis, that is a Chayla, just as I think a reason. He said, he brings the Avaneza, famous Avaneza, that says that by a tainus, the Mashal Tisha B'Av, Makom Chayli Lo Gazru. So it's not the pshat is it's like the Chuya or even a Hutra, like Gazru. Someone's a Chayla has a head to eat. So obviously he's not supposed to just eat and stam dvom of osim and stam geschmack azachen because he's supposed to feel a mistayer mitzar tzibur. But to say that he has to be mitzamtzim to eat exactly what he needs for himself, nothing more, he says that's not true. It's there's no gzeir. So they have to, they're mechuyev Havdalah and they have to hear Havdalah. That's what he answered him back. So you have to, that's the minhag olam, that avada, anyone that eats on Tisha B'Av has to hear Havdalah before, unless they want to drink water. For water, you don't have to hear Havdalah anytime. And we're then over here. Now, the question is, who's going to make the Havdalah? So if you have a regular chayla, okay, it's very simple. He can make the Havdalah. What happens if it's a lady? We know that there's a big shail in the paiskim. If a lady, it's a shail in the shayna really. If a lady is mechuyev in Havdalah, it's a simmer reish tzadi vav sevches. There's a big shail in the paiskim. If a lady is mechuyev in Havdalah, mitzad sheni. So normally the husband is meitzia. Mitzad sheni, I mentioned before, there's a shmuz in the paiskim that maybe someone that's fasting is not really mechuyev in Havdalah. It's not the pshat is that there's a hechatimtza, he can't make it. Since he can't make it, he's takanah mechuyev. Someone is a chayla, is mechuyev. So if someone's ain't a mechuyev davar, can be made to someone that's a mechuyev. That's the question. So there's different shittas what to do. Some takas say that the lady should make the Havdalah herself, and that would be better. But I think what's ongenommen in the Minhag Klal Yisrael, and there's a Truvin Shever Levi and Mrs. Karelitz and others, and that's what Amoy Rabah is, that the men, if the husband is around, then he should make the Havdalah, because then we hold that he is considered the Mechuyev B'Davar. He makes the Havdalah, and better to avoid the Shaila of the woman making the Havdalah, which l'chatchila we try to avoid that, of the woman making the Havdalah. Obviously, if the husband is not home and she has to eat, so then she should make the Havdalah, because I let her make Havdalah right away Motzei Shabbos, but that's straight in Paiskim, that obviously you don't eat before you have to. So if she can wait till the next morning, so she should wait the next morning. So that's what she's going to make Havdalah. So if he's in shul, so she'll make Havdalah at that point. Or if he's home, he'll make Havdalah in Motzei. Next question is, who's going to drink the Havdalah? So before we get to who's going to drink, let's first talk about what we make the Havdalah on. Mal, you make the Havdalah. Some people make on wine, some on grape juice. But the question is, during the 9 days, we know you're not allowed to drink grape juice, you're not allowed to drink wine. But the emes is that on Tisha B'Av it's much more chava. That we don't drink wine during the 9 days is stam a minhag ba'alma. The Goyin says it's based on the Gemara Bava Basra. The Gemara Bava Basra says that they came to, I forgot which man Damar, came to him and they told him that there's a churban Beis HaMikdash, how can we eat basar? They used to bring kabbanas, how can we drink wine? There was nisach, we don't have these things. So he said it's not a good taina. But then I think the Gemara says there that he told him that how could you, so we shouldn't be able to have kemach because they bought menachas, we shouldn't be able to drink water because of nisach hamayim. Amela, basically he says that unfortunately life has to go on, but a certain takanas that they made, shasa chastana, when you build a house, certain takanas to do zeichel churbans. The Goyin says that that's where the minute came from, not to drink wine and eat basar in the 9 days, because at least once a year, and as man of churban, we should remember that there was taka as man of Beis HaMikdash, and we had basar shlomim, and we had wine of nisach, and we should remind ourselves that we're missing that, and this was the zeicher. But that's during the 9 days. But Medina the Gemara is that you're not allowed to eat basar and yayin by the Sunnah Mafsekas. That's Medina the Gemara. If someone eats basar yayin by the Sunnah Mafsekas, the Gemara says, yayin the TISHA B'Av. Now, when the Farshim say TISHA B'Av refers to Sunnah Mafsekas, steht all of Akasavai, Mishrekel the Gazach, is am Zeiche for the Gula, it's a terrible Zach. So that's Medina the Gemara. So it's a stick of a problem. You're going to drink wine and grape juice on TISHA B'Av. So l'chayra, it's very schwer to do that. It's not like stamp during the 9 days. So l'chayra is a Pasha Eitzah. The Pasha Be'etzah would be to use Chama Medina. L'chayra is a simple Eitzah. But we'll see, l'chayra it's not so Pashat. So let's go through a little bit the Indian of Chama Medina. A lot of people talk and they say, yeah, Chama Medina, but people don't understand. Chama Medina is a sugya. We have to understand, Taka, what the sugya is, what was gezok by Chama Medina, and what is Chama Medina. See, Taka, if we could apply Chama Medina in today's time. So the sugya Chama Medina is a sugya in Pesachim Daf Zayin. The Gemara says that when yayin is not motzui, you can make Havdalah Chama Medina. Like the Gemara talks about Sheikh beer. The Gemara brings an interesting story there, that there was someone that came to give us a place and they didn't have wine. They bought him beer. He says he didn't make Havdalah. Bas Tovitz, that means he fasted. He didn't make Havdalah. Next time he came, he saw the same thing. They didn't have wine, they only had Sheikher. He says, oh, they don't have wine over here. So he says, Vaisas Chama Medina, and then he made Sheikher, he made Havdalah and Sheikher. Upon him, that's a Gemara. Medina the Gemara, there's a Musig of Chama Medina. And the Gemara is only discussing Havdalah and Chama Medina. There's no Gemara that speaks about Kiddush. Regarding Kiddush, there's Machogid Shainim, if you can make Kiddush on Chama Medina, it's a thesis in Pesachim Daf Vav. Why should Kiddush be worse? So there's two Mahalchim in the Shainim. The Mordechai says, because Kiddush we have as a smachta. The Mordechai Pesachim Daf Vav, Zachrei al Yayin, there's a special smachta to make Kiddush al Yayin. So maybe that's why it's Mochama. The Rosh says, because Kiddush eats a pas. So the Rosh says, if that's true, that's only Kiddush by night. You can make Kiddush on pas. Mashenkein by Yoim, they can't make Kiddush on pas. So then the Rosh says that you could make a Chama Medina. Upon him, there's a Shaul Gabi Bichsamozin if you can make a Chama Medina. But what's called in the Gemara is the Gabi Havdalah. Our discussion is Havdalah. Havdalah is clear in the Gemara. The Gabi Kiddush is a Shaul, Bichsamozin is a Shaul. In Shulchan Aruch, it's brought down 5 different places, the din of Chama Medina. It's brought down a Reish Sadi Vav, Sebeis, L'gabi Ik Halacha, L'gabi Havdalah, that you can make Havdalah on Chama Medina, or which is Sheikher, or any other thing that would be considered Chama Medina, and that's Medina the Gemara. Second place is brought down in Hilchos Kiddush, and Chaba and Reish Ayin Beis, Sif Tes brings down the Machoyket Shainim, if you can make Kiddush on Sheikher, on Chama Medina, and the Chaba brings down the Rosh, that Balayla, since you could do Pas, you shouldn't make it, and by Yom, then you can make it on Sheikher. And the Ramah says the minig is like the Rosh, this spalt. And that's why the Mechaber brings down in Reish Pei Tes, that's the Gei Kiddush Hayom, that if it's Ein Yayim Otto, you can make Kiddush on Beer, Sheikher. The same thing the Mechaber brings down in Reish Sadi Beis, if Beis, that's a Chuz Bech Samazon. Also, that if you want to make Bech Samazon Alakais, I mean, certain Rishonim hold in certain cases you have to make a Alakais, but making Alakais, the halacha is that Ein Yayim Otto, you could use Sheikher. And the same thing, there's a Shmuz in the Paiskim, in Tov Pei Gimel, Chus Pesach, if it's Ein Yayim Otto, could you make the Alakaises on Chama Medina? Kaponim, that's the Musig of Chama Medina. It's a Klora, Halacha, Medina, the Gemara, L'chol HaPoches, by Havdalah, other things is Machayik. So let's talk about L'gabe Havdalah. So what are the Klora of Chama Medina? First of all, when is there a Het Chama Medina? And what exactly is Chama Medina? So what the Het Chama Medina is, the TISHA Chama Medina, the literal translation of Chama Medina means the wine of the Medina. That means it's the wine of the Medina, that even though it's not wine, but the wine of the Medina has the mile of wine. The Rambam says, Medina sheroiv yeina sheikha. Roiv, it's wine, that means roiv of its wine is beer. So Rambam says, even though it's Pasla Kiddush, because Rambam passes like those are Shainim, he says still you can make Havdalah on that. So Rambam is informed that the Yisod of Chama Medina is called wine. The Shulta Gebayrim says, Mokim shekayim sedasam ala sheikha, v'reif shisasam, whatever the shtia is sheikha, Hasheicha hulen kamo yain. The sheikh of the beer is like wine. So the yesod of the shita of the Rambam is that if that's the roiv shtia, that's considered like the wine of the Medina. Melo that gets a chashivas. Chazal gave a chashivas agapon legabe havdalah. In Rashbam says very clearly in Psachim that the din of Chama Medina is only if there's no other wine, beer zayis. That means it's not benimtza, you can't have. I mean, there's nothing else. And the Rashbam is masba very nicely. What's the pshat? He says the Lashon said like this: the kivon the ein yain ache beer zayis toiv lo sheyavda mishlo yavda. That means that we're coming to a crossroads, like the Gemara's mashma, that we have a situation when the person does not have wine. So he has a choice: either not to make havdalah. And the Gemara speaks about, and it's a sugi in Shulchan Aruch. What happens if someone doesn't have wine? What should he do? So how long he has to wait till the next day? And then what should he do? He's aynus. So Rashbam says, L'maisa, Chazal said, listen, if it's a question of making Havdalah, not making Havdalah, so we'd rather you give you a takana to make Havdalah with Sheikher, better than not to make Havdalah at all. So like the Rashbam, it's only mamish when there's no Eitzah. But the Rambam says, Medina Sharoi Vienna Sheikha, that's Yain. It's Mashal and Ram. It's not like a B'di'evidig thing. Called Kamal Lamaisa, that's the Mitzis, that the Roiv Yain of the Medina is Sheikha, that gets to Chashivas of wine. A lot of dafka, there has to be dafka ba'ifin that Ein Yain Motzi. Really, in the Lomdus, the Machigas Rambam and the Rashbam, really is Shiftasayu. The Rambam holds that the Shrevish of the Heter of Chama Medina is because that's the wine in the Medina. So it gets to Chashivas of Yain. As long as roiv the shtia, that gets a chashivas of yain. Masha'engel like the Rashbam, the nakuda is it's adifa lahavdal azem ishloi lahavdal. I mean, Chazal said better to make on this, which is taken out so like a tchila, but better than to go away without any havdalah. So v'shteitzach, it's only if there's no eitzah. So it's a very negative shaila. Who do we pass like? Do we pass like the Rambam that says as long as it's roiv it's enough? We pass like the Rashbam that says no, it's only mamish, it's ein benimtza. So the Machaber Nechus Kiddush, Reisha in base, if test is clear, b'mokim she'en yayim motzu, yeishayim she'mekatron love. The reason why he says yeishayim, because he mentioned before that there is a shita that holds you can't, the Rama shita Moshe holds you can't be mekadosh b'chlal on Chama Medina. It's only a het legabi havdalah. So Machaber says yeishayim that you're allowed to make Kiddush on Chama Medina, but Lashon Machaber is b'mokim she'en yayim motzu. The same thing, the Machaber Nechus Kiddush Hayoim, Reish Pei Tesef Beis says the same thing. So it's pretty clear that the Mechaber Paskin, like the sheet of the Rashbam, that it's only a heta b'mokim she'ein yayin motzi. And I saw you take the Magen Avram over there, Tzivkot Vav, that the Mechaber clearly Paskins like the sheet of the Rashbam, that it's only a heta bein eitz, like the Rashbam says, toiv lo sheyavdil mishlo yavdil. Midachisa, the Rabbi over there says, no, he also Paskin like the Rambam. No. So as the Mishnah Berurah paskins, Mishnah Berurah over there says in Sifkot and Chav Dalet, he's paskins like the Magen Avram, that Chama Medina is only a heter to make a Chama Medina is only in Mokim she'en yayin motzi b'chol ha'ir. Bialochi brings the Rabbi. He says it's not a gay anyways because the Rabbi paskins is going with the Rambam. Rambam anyway holds the Gabi Kiddush is not negir. Oh, what about maybe Gabi Avdollah, maybe you could be Mekel then, because then you have it here for the Rambam. The Mechaber in Hilchos Avdollah, Reish Tzadivov Sebeis says, "Ashecher mebavdilim mechama Medina." Over there, Taka doesn't say Mein Yayin Motzim. So maybe you could say that in the Chanami. The pshat is when it came to Hilchos Kiddush, the Rambam doesn't hold Bechlal. You can make Kiddush on Chama Medina. So Mela, now you want to make a double kula. First of all, you're making Kiddush on Chama Medina, and then take the Shittas of Rambam that even if it's Yayin Motzim, which Rambam himself doesn't hold the Gabi Kiddush, that's like a double kula. But the Gabi Avdollah, everyone's masking that the Chama Medina. Maybe the Mechaber did paskin like Rashbam. There would be a mokim for Yesh Mokel Baldin to tie it that way, and there's a particular raya because the Mechaber in Reishayim Beis when he talks about Kiddush by night, he brings the Rashbam. When it comes to Kiddush by day, Reish Pei Tesef Beis, he brings the Rashbam. That means Davka Ein Yayin Motzi. When it comes to Avdollah, it doesn't say that. That's what L'chira maybe one could say. But the Mishnah Berurah over there in Hilchos Avdollah says very clear that the Mechaber didn't say it because in Hilchos Kiddush, the Mechaber goes through all the halachas of Chama Medina, and the Mishnah Berurah over there is Meirach, so he didn't have to chazir over again. But Avada, he's saying what he wrote over there that Ein Yayin Motzi. So the Bible we have till now, it's very clear in Shulchan Aruch, and even the guy Avdollah Mishnah Berurah says that way that the whole din that a person could be mekadosh or even be mavdil. A chama medina is like the shita of the Rashbam, dafka im ein yayin motzi, which means, like the Rashbam says, odef loy lahavdil on something that's not like a tchila, mish lo yavdil klal. So Mela, today, Baruch Hashem, there's benimtza wine, there's benimtza grape juice, which has it in a wine, the whole dover. Mela, avada l'choy, there's no shaila. Avada, you can't, there's no such thing as chama medina. It could be chama medina, but the head of chama medina is dafka im ein yayin motzi. That's the chayra, the vayla we were holding till now. Oh. The problem is like this. There was a minig kadmoin, seems to be a very old minig, that they used to make kiddush Shabbos morning on beer. That was the minig, not a new minig, a minig that was around for many, many days. Now beer is chamar medina. Like we said, even though the Rambam holds that you can't make kiddush on chamar medina, we said the ikar we pass like a shita of the rosh, that's mechalak between kiddush by night and kiddush by day. Okay, fine. Balamaisa, we pass like the Rashbam, that's only be'ein yayin motzui. And they did it. Doesn't say that they did it afterwards when it was ein yayin motzui. So this Shiloh, the first one that I'm aware of is kasha, is the Bach. The Bach in Hilchos Kiddush says he doesn't understand how could you make Kaddish on Shecher when people have wine in their house. They have in their storage room, they have wine, and they go lahedya and they make Kiddush on beer. He says Apella. So the Bach says that this Shiloh was asked Lefnei Chachamim B'asifas Chacham. He said there was a big gathering Rabbonim. Maybe there was a big Me'etzes meeting or something. The G'dolei Rabbonim, and he says, you know who was sitting by the meeting? The Shklenera from the Mashal. They look at Mashal from the G'dolei Apoiskim. We know the Mashal in the back in the Gemara. But the Mashal was from the G'dolei Apoiskim. He was the Tkufa of the Ramah, the door before the Mashal, before the Bach. I mean. So he was like the Gola door in the Bach, the door before, and the Bach says was sitting there. The Eilig Mashal was sitting there. And this Shaila was asked in front of all the Gedolim at that time, and he said that no one had what to answer this question. I mean, that was the minig in Klal Yisrael that everyone made Kiddush on beer. And even though they had Yayin Motzi, it means, what do you mean they had the Yayin Motzi? He says, and people had at the house, they had wine. What did they do Friday night? They didn't make Kiddush Friday night on pasta, they ate on wine. So what's the pshat? So he says his pshat, which a very fair pshat, which all the achronim much on his pshat. The Taz says like this, that a lot of them had yayin motzi, but yayin was very, very expensive. So when they had no choice, Kiddush by night, there's no choice. Okay, so they made, even though you can make on pas, but it's not so l'chatchila. So then they made Kiddush, but by day, since it's an eitzah, so maybe the minhag was to be in sheikh. I'd have wine. So what do you mean they have wine? You know how much money it costs them the wine? You know, today we have a bottle of wine you get for $7, $8. I don't know what it costs today, but in those days, money wasn't like today. And it was very expensive. So he says, the Taz Mechadish, that just the fact they have wine in your house, that doesn't mean yayin motzi. It means yayin motzi, it means it's motzi that's, it's cheap. But he's Mechadish, that if it's very, very expensive, that's called like yayin, it's not motzi, even though it's hard to understand. The whole sword Ashbam is Tovlish, Allah Yavdil, Misha Yavdil. Like upon him, that's what the Taz says. And the Mishnah Berurah brings down this Taz. He says in Sifkot and Chavtes, over there in Hilchos Kiddush, Dina Seinu, now Medina, Shayayin Beyoiker, Veroiv Shtiyasem Medina Mishamashkin, Loinogu Afila Hagedoilim, Lahadar Acha Yayin Beyoim, Hes Kiddush Leim Rabbonim. Vesoimchen outside the Makilim. So Mishnah Berurah over there lakes soon the Shatzin a little bit more. That means, because that's like I said, if you go straight to Rashbam, it's really very shred. Because Rashbam says it's for of Tayloi, Shaloi, Lahavdil, Allah Sheikhim, Shaloi Lahavdil Klal. That's very shred to say they have the Rashbam. So B'Shabur, the Shatzin lakes a little bit to the task. That we always have the Rambam to be Seimicha. That means, really, it's time to go with the Rambam, we're not going to be Seimicha on the Rambam. Now for us, since the Maisa, Ein Yayin Motzi, what does it mean Yayin Motzi? Doesn't mean we'd mamish don't have wine. Mice are very expensive, so it's a very big shasat chak. So maybe for that we're going to be saying on the shitas HaRambam for Kiddush. That's only a Shaul Rabban. So upon him, that would be one heter, one pshat in the minhag in Klal Yisrael to make havdalah, to make Kiddush on sheikh. Now that obviously doesn't apply today. Baruch Hashem, we have wine. If someone can't afford wine, you can buy grape juice. Baruch Hashem, there's a shefa of bracha today, and I don't think anyone could say that today there's an issue of wine or grape juice is too expensive. Maybe there's expensive wine. Like upon me, definitely could buy grape juice or wine for very cheap, and it doesn't apply this heter at all. So you do it. The Mishnah Berurah used to make kiddush on Pas, and even his kais, the family didn't want to show the Mishnah Berurah's kais. It was such a small say he was saying mechan. You know, we have no what the aniyus was in those days. But upon him, this heter the Mishnah Berurah brings doesn't apply. So we have to move on. Noch a heter. The Ramah in Hilchos Havdalah says like this. Reish Tzadi Vavsev Beis says, "Nogul havda moitze pesach ala sheikh v'lo yain." The minig is moitze pesach to make havdalah on beer, not wine. Hiyos techavolav. So what's this new het of chavolov? So you could say, let me look at the Mar Psachim Kuf Zayin is mashma that there's a musig of something that's chavolov that itself gives the chashivas, even as nachama medina. There's a shtickle makor for that Indian. If you look at the Mar Psachim Kuf Zayin, and that's a shtickle the makor. They let it be mekadosh on pas because it's either the chaviva love. We state in the Rishonim Makovov and Psachim. The Goyin stells to that Gemara, but the Magen Avram and the Mishnah Berurah clearly say that's only betzirif that it's Chama Medina. That means, but the Chiddush of Chavolav is, even though it's going to the parish of Chama Medina, but it's Mavur that even if it would be Yayin, it would be Motzi, but it's a special svara that's Chavolav that there would be a heter. So mainly after Pesach, Maisa, wine you could drink on Pesach, grape juice you could drink on Pesach, but Sheikha beer is chametz. Mishnah Berurah Paskins, it's chametz gamas. So mainly the people have a gewaldige chavivis after Pesach to have a cup of beer. So mainly there's a gewisse chavivis to have it. So mainly that's why there was a minig that they used to make kiddush moitze Pesach on beer. Could be the people still do it. So in the chanami, if making havdalah on moitze Pesach on beer, there is a makor and halacha. Akaponim ba'ifin that it's chav by a person, even though really it's yayin motzi, but the fact that it's chav of that overrides that halacha. So enachanami. So if someone has a gavaldik chavivus beer and he enjoys beer and even more than wine, so enachanami, such a person taka there would be a heter to be mavdil ala sheichem chav. But that verstetzach is totally on the metzias, if that's the metzias. Now, there is other achronim that say that even though lagabi kiddush, we can't be mekel to be mekadosh ala sheikher unless it ain't yain motzi. Well, lagabi avdolah we say mechandai rabbit. Mishnah Berurah is clearly not like that, but some want to say not like the Mishnah Berurah. There's a truva mayashim and chelik aleph simanun zayin that says someone has a very hard time drinking wine, either bechinas refuas or other reason. Then he could be mekel v'chama medina. He says because b'chai gavna, even though avada you can't say it's not called ein yaim motzi, avada it's yaim motzi, but b'chai gavna he says that then you could be saying on the shita of the Rambam. Maisa, and that's the way, and that's the way we feel. Like a lot of times you have people for whatever various reasons that they can't drink grape juice or wine, diabetic. Or there could be other reasons. I'm not going to get into all the reasons, but it's a very sheikhtig shaila that people, for whatever reason, they cannot drink wine or grape juice. So for some people like that, we would be makel to make havdalah. There's no way to they can't have someone else. There's no way to make havdalah on Chamam Medina. But it comes out for a regular person. It comes out it's not so pashut because first of all you have to have ein yayim motzi because we pass in like the sheet of the Rashbam. Ein yaim motzi means ein yaim motzi. It's only mamet b'shas atchak. Now for us, we said that the Paiskim said even though the minig was to be make kiddush on sheikher, that minig to make kiddush on sheikher was because yain was very much b'yoker, so it's called maybe ein yaim motzi, or because then we're saying on the sheet the Rambam. We said someone makel by if it's chaviv, so that's totally on the case. If the sheikher was taka chavilov, or someone mechiner refuis. For a medical issue, he can't drink grape juice or wine. So weiter, or Yashva, there's true and others that say then you can be samech on the shita of the Rishonim that says the Rambam that even if it's motzi, you can make havdalah on that. But for a regular person that comes out, it's far from pashut. Oh, but there's other problems besides besides that it's not so poshut. Why? Just one more svara I don't want to mention. There's another svara the place can want to say that a new pshat in why it has to be yayin motzi. Till now we're going that the reason why it has to be yayin motzi, do we explain the Rashbam svara, because if it's yayin motzi, then you could make a wine. Yayin ain't a motzi toiv loy lahavdu mishlo yavdu. But there is another mahalach to learn that the reason why the Rashbam holds that has to be yayin motzi, that has to be ein yayin motzi, not saying the Rashbam himself, because he says dimshat, but in that sheet in the Shulchan Aruch, that has to be dafka ein yayin motzi, is because if it's yayin is motzi, you can't call something else, let's say beer, that's the Chama Medina. How can you call beer Chama Medina? Yayin is motzi. People drink wine. But if it's ein yayin motzi, then that second darga, the beer, could be called the wine of the Medina. But that was in those days. In those days, the Metzias is that people used to drink wine. It was part of the suit. They drank wine. Leroiv, Melo was a place that they didn't have wine, so they used sheikh or something else instead of it. But today, in a normal situation, people don't drink wine stam. Most people, they use wine for Kiddush, for Havdalah, the Chayvus and Mitzvah. But more than that, they don't stam drink wine. I'm not saying there aren't people, but most people don't stam drink wine. So Melo, other Achayim want to say, that doesn't have the chesron of ein yayin motzi. The yisod of ein yayin motzi is because otherwise, how could you give sheikh or shem Chama Medina? It's not Chama Medina. People drink wine, but today that no one drinks ain't wine stamazoi, maybe something else could get a shem Chama Medina. This is another mahalach that some of the Gdei Achronim, the Sheva Levi is a truva, Liashiv, and others want to say pshat. So kapon, let's be misakim what we have till now. What would be the studim to make kiddush or Havdalah on Sheikher? L'chayra and Shulchan Aruch is gepasken clearly like the sheet of the Rashban dafke mein yayin motzi. So one mahalach was that ein yayin motzi means if it's very, very expensive, then we're soymich on the Rambam, or that's called ein yayin motzi. That was one thing. Or if it's chavvalov, that itself would be a heter. The third thing was b'shasat chak. Someone mechin refuus is hard to drink. That would also be considered ein yayin motzi. And the fourth malach is the yisod of ein yayin motzi is not like the Rashbam learns toivloi sheyavdu mishlo yavdu, so b'sheitzer it's a shasat chak, and when there's no eitzer. A different mahalach. The yisod of the Rashbam shita is that ein yayin motzi is because if it's yayin motzi, people are drinking wine. People are drinking wine. How can you say something else is the Chama Medina? That's the wine of the Medina. What do you mean? The wine of Medina is wine. But today, even if people will use wine, they have wine, there's no shortage of wine, but people don't stop drink wine. That's not what they're using as the drink, the table drink. What people using table drink is something else. So Mela, there's something else that could take the tachlif and be considered Chama Medina. So these are all svaris to Miyashiv, the minik, but to say Bepshitis, that to go be Mekel, it's not so posh because all these svaris are just said to Miyashiv, the minik. But Lomazorgan, we're going to go with this Hanocha that will be Saimach, that we could have a Chama Medina today. But let's first see, what do you need in order for something to be considered Chama Medina? Even that's not so posh. First of all, you have to have ein yayin motzi, now with Miyashiv become a fan. Okay, fine. But what do you need to turn something into Chama Medina? So that is also many Gedorim Gdolei Pais. Let's go through it Bekitzer. The Magen Avram in Hilchos Bechs Hamazon, Simen Kuf Pei Beis Sif Kotten Beis says, the Mokim Shein Shoysen and Yayin El Leprokim Lo Yahave Chama Medina Midi Tahave Yasham Mashkin Yain Tapuchim Yain Reboinim. So Magen Avram says that it has to be something that people drink Keseda, not only Leprokim. Same thing Magen Avram in Hilchos Kiddush says that you can't make Kiddush on Yain Soref, schnapps. Why? Because Roiv Medina is the Medina only in a place that Roiv Shtias Hamoim who be Yain Soref v'chol Yain v'Yain. People drink it Keseda, but if they don't drink it Keseda, it can't be called Chama Medina. As I bring Dali Rabba in Hilchos Bechs Hamazon, also this psak of the Magen Avram has to be something that people drink Keseda. But if it's only Leprokim, that can't be called Chama Medina. The Shulchan HaRav in Hilchos Bechs Hamazon, this is Kuf Pei Beis Sif Dalet, says no. Even if something people only drink Leprokim, it still could be considered Chama Medina. Machmas Chashivusa. This is a big nafkamina. According to Magen Avram, has to be something you're drinking Keseda, and according to Shulchan HaRav, even if you're drinking Leprokim. Suri Pascal like. The Mishnah Berurah clearly in Hilchos Birchas Hamazon brings down the Magen Avraham. You have to have something to drink a seder. And the Shatzion over there he brings the Shulchan Aruch HaRav. But Akaponim, Tzricha not so poshut. Akaponim, that's one tonight. That it could be you have to have something they drink a seder. Maybe you have a mokum to be samech on the Shulchan Aruch HaRav. Weiter, there are many Gdoilei Achronim that hold that the Din of Chamam Medina is only something that has a koyach l'shaker. They say the Gemara is talking about shecher. Shecher is something, you can get, doesn't have to be mamish drunk, but you definitely get very high from shecher. Dumi the yain, chazal masakin, something dumi the yain that's mesameich b'shaker. Mashenkein, other things, there's true in halachas katanis and true sadal, that they see other things. They're talking about dvash, made dvash, current med, the place when we speak about med, or yain sorov. Here, taka that had alcohol content in it. So they said on that you can make havdalah on med or yain sorov. But something that doesn't have that, you wouldn't be able to. So they discussed their sheikher b'zmanayim. Maybe today's also that way. That it's very weak and it's not considered davar meshakar. And mele today you wouldn't be able to make havdalah on beer. That's what this halachas katanis and the vidal. This is from a couple hundred years ago. That's what they write. Maisa, I think most achronim nem are not like them. They hold that you don't need this tonight for Chamam Medina, that it's something that's meshakar. The Magen Avraham in Hilchos Birchas Hamazon, the Magen Avraham in Hilchos Pesach discuss different shilas, certain mashkois against the Chamam Medina. Speaks about mei tapuchin, mei lekerish, bosh, all different types of things. And look at all the Gdoilei HaPoskim, they speak about all types of mashkin that the Metzias is that it's not meshakar, and he has other reasons why maybe it's not considered Chamam Medina. But mitzad that it's not meshakar, the Magen Avraham does not mention. So it seems the Magen Avraham does not hold of this svara of the Hilchos Tanis, and the Mishnah Berurah brings down these fakes of Magen Avraham. So it seems the Mishnah Berurah we don't go with this. And Mishnah Berurah, many places speaks about often the Vishailis doesn't seem he went, but this is very interesting. I saw once in the Truvan in Truvas Hanogas and Chelik Dalet. He has a Kabbalah going back to Reb Chaim Volozhin and the Goyin, like this Shita, that has to have a Dover HaMeshaker. And he says, Lafiya Yidua Hirschka Grach Mibrisk Beitz Shita. Means Reb Chaim went very stark that the whole din of making Havdalah is only on Shecher. Beer, something that's Meshaker, but something else that's not Meshaker, there's no heter. But the Mishnah Berurah, like I said, is important. I like that. He being did. David told him, David told him that the scroll allowed him to make Havdalah, I guess when it was necessary, when there's nothing else, to make Havdalah on tea. And seems to be the Amad Bar is not like this Shita that has to be the Shakar. So upon the either we have one tonight, then maybe it has to be something you drink a Seder. The Shulchan Aruch HaRav says the Prokim. Mishnah Berurah Be'ikah goes, you have to have a Shtiyah Seder. Weiter, do you need a Midah the Mishakar or not? A lot of Achronim hold you need the Mishakar. It seems to be from the Mishnah Berurah Halacha that you do not need that. Now, it's very interesting, Shaul, the Rishonim discuss, why shouldn't water be considered Chamam Medina? Everyone knows water. Everyone drinks water. But Shteit Rashbam, the water cannot be considered Chamam Medina. The Mechaber brings it down. Shaul is why not? So there's different Mahalchim, the Achronim. What comes out, there's a Mashal that's brought down in the Magen Avraham and Hilchos Birchas Hamazon. That's Mavur, that the Pshat is because it's not Zaini. That's something that gives a zon to it. The Lord says everything is zon, besides Mayim and Melech. Mayim doesn't have the mile of zon. The Taz has a different take. The Taz says because it's not choshev. Taz talks about an interesting thing about making Havdalah on borscht. So Magen Avraham brings a mashal that you could be makel. And the Taz says, Chas v'sholem, he says, Loite, he can't be Yisrael to make on borscht. He says, not choshev, it's like Mayim. So it seems from the Taz he understood that Nakuda Mayim is not choshev. For Chamam Medina you have to have something choshev, and the Mashal understood because Mayim is not Zaini. The Mishnah Berurah says, passings like the Taz, that you cannot make on borscht because it's not choshev. It's not choshev. So it comes out, it's clear that you have to have something that has a cheshivas. Afukei Mayim and only Mayim, even borscht doesn't have a cheshivas. So that's another tonight that the place can say. Nacha Nakuda, in Shulchan Aruch HaRav says, in Kuf Pei Beis, in Hilchos Birchas Hamazon, he says, has to be something, the Roiv Anshe Amokim Darkon Lekvei Suda Aleim. Just like Yain, they would Kevei Suda. So it has to be something that Kevei Suda on it. So I bring the Mincha Shabbos also. That means, what does it mean, Kaveh Suda? Because the Shulchan is Mazba. Kaveh Suda means they bring it on the Shulchan during the Suda, the beginning of the Suda, the end of the Suda. It's a tachla for yayin. So like that, it comes out. Only mashkin that with a tachla for yayin in those days used to bring yayins and warn the Gemara how much wine they used to drink by the Suda, or something that would be the tachla for yayin would have this halacha, but anything else wouldn't have this din of Chama Medina. And he also, you have to have chashivas. The Shulchan HaRav himself says that borscht wouldn't be good. Weiter, there's a tshuva from Nigis Moshe that he says it has to be a mashka that people don't drink just because when they're thirsty. He says something that a person only drinks when you're thirsty, that doesn't have chashivas Chama Medina. Chama Medina is something that you're drinking even if you're not thirsty. You're drinking at al-kavod suda, so chashivas in the suda you bring this mashka. Or he says if you have guests, this is what you serve them. He says wine, you love to drink wine when you're thirsty. So chashav is actually used to drink wine. He says same thing, beer, yayin soref. You drink for kavod b'alma. But he says, for example, Moshe is true about soda. He says soda people drink when they're thirsty. People don't drink soda. It's not something that you just bring l'kavod. So he says soda wouldn't be a Chama Medina. So let's be misakim what we have till now. So we have over here, besides what we spoke about, that the heter is only if it's ein yayin motzui, which was one issue, but what bechefts is Chama Medina? So we said, first of all, it has to have something that has a chashivas, lafukei mayim, lafukei borscht. Mishnah Berurah says that wouldn't have a din of Chama Medina. Weiter, it has to be something that you drink a seder, but not something that's only a prokim. Weiter, it has to be something that's a tachlif of yayin, that takes the place of yayin that's brought to the suda, the beginning of the suda, the end of the suda. That's like the Shulchan HaRav says, and Moshe says something that you mechabit. And lav dafka, every sheet, the whole thing, every one, I'm just bringing out the shilas that you have, the Gabi Chama Medina. So let's go through now some of the shilas about which things are Chama Medina, which things can't be. Shecher, beer. So beer, that's the case of the Gemara, that's Chama Medina. That had all the troim. It's choshev, it's meat the mishaker, and all the paiskim, speak about Chama Medina, but speaking about shecher. But Maisa, the Achronim from the latest generation, starting from the Aruch HaShulchan, and Hilchos Kiddush, and the Chaznish, they all write that today shecher is not considered Chama Medina because it doesn't take the place of yayin, that it's something that people drink keseda. So they hold that you can't be mekadosh, can't make havdalah on shecher. This is Aruch HaShulchan and Hilchos Kiddush, and Chaznish is brought down many places. In the Din of Hanogas, Reb Chaim brings down Bach Zabenu, Chotshoni, Koyvis Truvas, many places brought down. That was the sheet of the Chaznish. Weiter, Yayin Sorf. So Yayin Sorf is something that's brought down all the Paiskim. That could be considered Chama Medina. The Magen Avraham brings it down. The Mishnah Berurah brings it down. There's a Truvas Masham. The Aruch HaShulchan who says that Sheikha beer is not Chama Medina, but he says, but there's nothing that's Chama Medina besides Yayin Sorf, besides, vodka. But today, that was in his time. But today, he was in Russia. But today, I don't think people just drink. Maybe there are some Yechidim, but the Hamoinam doesn't drink Shecher, Yain Sorf. The beginning of the Suda, the Chaber Eirich, Mela, it's not so poshut to make. There's a lot of truth to discuss it that today, Yain Sorf is not so poshut to be considered Chama Medina. Emes is another problem when people make Kiddush on, people make on Yain Sorf. The other people have Sheminik because their father had a minig, and their father did it because their father had a minig. But like everything, just because your father had a minig, you have to know not chas v'shalom to in fact forget a minig. Every minig in Klai Yisrael has makairis, but his father did it because that was a minig in Klai Yisrael, that the mekadosh on shecher, like we spoke about, and the mekadosh on yain sarf. But you have to understand what the minig was, and that minig still applies today. Now there's another problem that people mekadosh on yain sarf, they just take a little schnapps cup. Now we know in order to make kiddush, you have to have a revius. Question exactly what the size of revius is. The biggest share, Chaznish 5.2. Ramosha, the biggest share 4.42. But we're talking about Kiddush by day is on the Shad Rabbanon. It's on the smaller share, which is 2.9. You want to go to even a smaller share, 2.5. But upon him, let's go with 2.9. You have to drink more lugmav, which pastors is at least 1.9. Someone make it 1.5. But upon him, 1.9 lambazog. Okay, but the people are drinking much less than that, and the case is less than a revius. There's a strict of a problem, which is not a new shaila. This is a shaila that's discussed in all the Gedolei Paiskim, in the Mishnah Berurah, goes very stark that way in Siman Kuf Tzadi, and other places that Avada, there's no mokum for that. There is a Taz, that's where it's coming from, but he thinks very stark on this side. Oh. What about milk? Says a Birkei Yosef, from the Chidah, the Birkei Yosef, Reish Tzadi Vav, says not considered Chama Medina, and the Mishnah Berurah says very clear that milk is not considered Chama Medina because people don't drink it b'teres mashka. That means it's used as something else, but stam to drink milk up, which, like we explained, it's not something that's the tachlif of yain, that in the Suda, stam people drinking milk at the beginning of the Suda, the end of the Suda. You put milk in a coffee. Let's say some people like cake, so they drink the milk together with the cake. It's definitely not something you mechaber and oirich with. So that would be very shver. What about coffee and tea? So if you hold like the Shulchan HaRav, it's not something that you bring at the beginning of the Suda, the end of the Suda. Maybe at the end of the Suda you bring it. So according to Shulchan HaRav, coffee definitely would have been considered Chama Medina, and as I stated, Mincha Shabbos. Mincha Shabbos is a pirish from 200 years ago on the Kittah Shulchan Aruch and the Kseizer Shulchan, the Vushei Matcha. All Vushei Matcha was one of G'dolim in Europe before Muhammad. All of them write that according to the Shita Shulchan HaRav, coffee and tea would not be considered Chama Medina. According to the Shita of Ramesha, it's mistabra that coffee is something that people are machabit, something that people are not drinking just l'tzumoyim b'alma. People drink coffee. It's a kavod gezachi drinking coffee. You know, there's a whole coffee houses. They sell coffee. It's a chashav drink. Now, Moshe, the Sant, has a truth. He's sukim esafka by tea. Doesn't speak about coffee, but it's mistabra that coffee like Moshe Shita would be considered Chama Medina. What about mitztivi, marshal, orange juice, grapefruit juice? Okay, but let's talk about orange juice. Orange juice is something that people are kaveh Sudan. People do drink it during the Suda. People are mechaber noirich, you know, with a cup of orange juice. You see a lot of meetings, you see that they have orange juice. You know, it is something that's more benimtza. So there are achronim that held that orange juice maybe would be considered Chama Medina. Agaponim, l'sakim the rain, the Olam sees already that is not so poshut when what's considered Chama Medina. We have, first of all, we're starting off with the Shaila, yayin, that's not motzi. That's the heter. So otherwise something else can't get a shem Chama Medina. So we said different ways how to miyash the minig, either with Saimach on the sheet. The Rambam minigay havdalah, the Rambam holds that no, even if it's yayin motzi. Or we said there were places that yayin was biyoker, samelu maker, which obviously today doesn't apply. We said if someone has a problem in bechinu refuis, he can't drink it. So we're saying on that, which also depends on the situation. Or we said if it's chaviv, maybe to be mokin to mekel. Then we said there's a svar that someone be miyash dominik that ein yayim motzi the kuda is because otherwise there can't be something else like if you consider a tachlif of the wine. Mashenkin today that people don't drink wine during the Suda. So Mela, you don't have to have something that even if yain is motzi, something else could be considered a tachlif for wine. All these will come into miyash of the minik. So to say that it's so poshut is not so poshut, but upon him that if someone wants to make there is what to be saying. But after all that, we still said there's a lot of time they need. First of all, it has to be something you drink kaseda. Daita, it has to be something that maybe it's mashak. Okay, we said that you don't need. It has to be something that has a give us a chashivas. Daita has to be something according to Shulchan HaRav that's drunk at the beginning of the Suda, the end of the Suda. It's like a table drink. So let's see, not like that. But Moshe holds something that's mechaber oirich. So as the Olam sees, it's not so poshut. It's like upon him. Based on that, Lamaisa, in a normal situation, that's why it's not a recommended thing that a person should be saimach on beer or anything else to make kiddush or abdullah, because it's far from poshut. Why would a person get into the shaila? If someone can't drink wine or grape juice for a medical reason, they should ask shaila, but that is something that we are more makel, find the right mashka, we're more makel because it's a shtickle of a shasat chak. But getting back to our shaila gabe, Moitzah TISHA B'Av. Not Moitzah TISHA B'Av. Someone that wants to make on TISHA B'Av itself. So Maisa, since it's not so poshut, so Maisa, what are you going to do? You're going to make Havdalah on TISHA B'Av. You're going to use something that's not so poshut. So you're right. You have a problem. Yayin, but it's a maybe it's a bracha vatala. What are you doing? That's the question. So very interesting. There's a tshuva. Chalif's Mechtav between Reb Chaim and Rabbi Yasher. So I mentioned before the first part of the truth. The first part of the truth is that Reb Chaim wrote to him that he'll paskin that you should make Havdalah. Rabbi Yasher wrote to him that's nishrichted, all the places you have to make Havdalah. And we explained that before. The second part, so Chaim writes so Rabbi Yasha wrote back in the first Truva, you should make Havdalah on Chama Medina. So Chaim told him that we're in the Beis Medrash of the Chazon Ish. In Bnei Brak, we know that's the Beis Medrash of the Chazon Ish. In the Chazon Ish's Beis Medrash, there's no such thing as Chama Medina today. He holds nothing that's Chama Medina today. So he said, so what should we do? So Rabbi Yasha told him, says like this. He brings down the Biskarov in Sefer, wants a Medaik and Shitzer Rambam, that the Isser to eat Basav Yayin is only by the Sudim Hafsekes. On Tisha B'Av, there's no Isser. Obviously, there's an Isser on Tisha B'Av just like the 9 days. Obviously, on Tisha B'Av, you're not allowed to eat and drink. But if someone is allowed to eat on Tisha B'Av, he has the regular Isser of the 9 days. But the Choymer of Kol Ha'oichel V'Shoyse, Kol Ha'oichel Basav V'Shoyse Yayin B'Tisha B'Av, what Rishonim say means Sudim Hafsekes, is only by the Sudim Hafsekes. And the Biskrov has a whole shuk of Torah, Timaz was a pshat. So Yasha says, Hagam, there are rules before, not like that, but upon you have the Shitzer Rambam, the way the Biskrov learns. And the Ikadin of the Gemara of Yayin is only Yayin, not Yayin Megita. So grape juice is not that way. So Rabbi Yasha says that the right thing to make Havdalah on grape juice. Because first of all, like the Biskrov on Tisha B'Av, B'chal, you don't have a problem, according to Shitzer Rambam. And even that, Medina the Gemara, grape juice wouldn't have a problem. So Mela, that's the right thing, that someone that has to make Havdalah, the right thing is to make Havdalah on grape juice, even if it's even on Tisha B'Av, like I'm saying. Now, then there's another problem. If there's no eitzah, you could drink. But if there's a eitzah that you give someone else to drink, mashla kot, that would be better. Just like on Motzei Shabbos Chazayin is eitzah. So the best eitzah would be lechatchila to give it to a child. Avoid it between, let's say, 7 and 10. So that's higila chinuch, but it's not higila savul. If you don't have that, then you give it to someone that's, let's say, between a boy between 10 and 13. That would be the next best option. Why am I saying a boy over a girl? Because a girl, we know, the Magavam says that girls are not supposed to drink, ladies are not supposed to drink from Havdalah. If the Ma'aseh is no boy, then I would say this next step is, with a girl, have a girl drink. Either a girl at 7 to 10, or from 10 to 12. If not, the lady herself, or the chayil himself, should drink the Havdalah. Kaponim, that's, I think, Bekitzer, what comes out in the Shaila. Everyone should have a good Azumar, and the main thing, we should be Zeicha to the Gula B'Karov, and should all be in Yerushalayim, Mr. Shem, celebrate in Mr. Shem Tisha B'Av this year with the Bnei Beis HaMikdash, B'Karov.
So TISHA on a regular year.
Was it clear?